This is a Fatal 4 podcast.
The future of video games is now! Eyes forward, gamers, and prepare to shuffle those feet from side to side. It's time for Squared Circle Strafe, the premier video game podcast of the Fatal 4 podcasting network. I am your host, Pro Wrestling Noah, also known as Noah Stewart, and it's time to talk about video games. Hello, folks. Well, hello for this week, for this episode of Squared Circle Strafe. I am here, and it's been a busy week for video games, an eventful week for video games, I should say. A lot of announcements, a lot of stuff happening, a lot of companies talking about their upcoming games because Gamescom Opening Night Live happened this past week. Gamescom, the big video game convention, kind of happening in Cologne, Germany, kind of Europe's version of E3, the big video game show conference happening over there. And they showed off a bunch of stuff, had a big live stream that, you know, we I feel like we get a couple of these now that like E3 has essentially died. We get a lot of these conferences kind of throughout the year now, thanks to one Jeff Keighley, who is kind of in charge of all these things now. Got, you know, Summer Games Fest and Gamescom, and we'll have the Game Awards at the end of the year. That is also, it's an awards show for video games, but like everyone watches that for game announcements mostly. Like the awards are kind of secondary. Like people will get mad about whatever ends up winning Game of the Year and have arguments about it on Twitter, but people are mostly there just to see like, hey, Callisto Protocol, that's a game I've never heard of. How about that? But yeah, but the Gamescom happened. Let me go ahead and I'm going to tell you about a bunch of stuff that got announced there. If you didn't watch the show, and even if you did, maybe there's some stuff that you may have missed. I'm just going to go through kind of lightning round style, all the stuff that kind of stood out to me. I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm going to go over the stuff that kind of stood out to me and I think is interesting, and stuff that maybe you want to know about that's coming out down the road for video games. This whole Gamescom Opening Live stream started off with the pre-show, as most of these shows do, and they'll have some announcements from maybe some smaller games up front. The pre-show being hosted by one Kyle Bossman, formerly of Games Trailers and Easy Allies, and now is kind of doing his own thing with Delayed Input, which is a YouTube show that I love very much. I also enjoy watching his streams. Shout out to Kyle Bossman. Go check him out. But he did the hosting of the pre-show and showed off some new video games there. One of the first ones being a game from Tandemi called Begone Beast, which I had never seen before this. And I think this may have been the announcement for it, but it looks pretty cool. They describe it as a spooky top-down action game for 1 to 4 players. So it's like I guess you can play it as one player, but it's intended to be kind of a co-op situation. It says hack and slash and scream your way through hordes of demons. So imagine it's top down, but the vibe kind of feels like something like a Castle Crashers, where you've got like flashlights, what are also like swords that you use to smack all these demons. It looks like a bunch of crawling hands like coming after your characters. There's like kids, but there's also like anthropomorphic rabbits and bears and what it looks to be some kind of fishmen. But the style's really cool. I actually think it has like a really unique style. It kind of reminds me of like a Pixar looking kind of like face animations, really kind of rubber hose, really elastic animation. It looks really good. And also all the characters are constantly screaming, like they have big onomatopoeia coming out as they're running around. It looks like it has a lot of charm. So this one I definitely want to keep my eye on. Maybe convince some friends to check it out. After that, they showed off a game called Roadcraft from Saber Interactive. And this one looks like, so it looks, I can't tell mechanically what all is happening because maybe they're still trying to nail some of that down, but it looks like top down, you are coordinating a bunch of like service vehicles to clear out and pave roads for, like some sort of, like industry jobs, like resource management of the land, or like, transportation of goods and stuff. And you're corralling all of these different types of service vehicles to pave these roads. So it looks like it kind of has like, a top down, like management sim kind of thing, but maybe you also get to drive some of the trucks to do some of the specific jobs. I don't know. It's not really revealing a lot what like the kind of moment to moment gameplay is going to be like from the trailer, but I could imagine it being something. I enjoy American Truck Simulator. I haven't played any of the like Euro Truck simulators, but I think they're like basically the same thing, but I am from America and I enjoy driving the roads of familiar roads that I am familiar with. And I enjoy playing that game because it's a great, I've talked about it on the show before, a great podcast game where I can just kind of drive the highways and freeways going from, delivering one thing of goods to another, one place to another, and just kind of chilling out. Because I enjoy driving, just like in real life even, especially on long trips like that. And it's just like a real good, just like chill out, give my hands something to do while I listen to a podcast. And maybe Roadcraft can also provide that type of situation where it's just like, tell these trucks where to go, tell them to do their thing, and not have like a whole big narrative to have to focus on while I'm listening to a podcast or watching a video on the second monitor or something. The next game they announced, or not announced, we've actually already seen this game, but they showed a little bit more gameplay of it. A game called Carn, C-A-I-R-N, Carn, from the Game Bakers. And it is a rock climbing game. Pretty cool, like almost cel-shaded animation here. I really enjoyed last year. There was the indie game Jusant, however you care to pronounce it. That was like a rock climbing game, but I think it was mostly focused on like movement, on just like the climbing aspects. And you had like your little like jelly marshmallow creature that hangs out on your shoulder because it's like a little fantasy. This one looks a little more kind of grounded in reality. Maybe some like fantastical landscapes perhaps, but it seems like it's much more focused. It bills itself as a survival climber. So it's a little more focused on having the right equipment, kind of cycling through items like, you need rations so that, you keep up your stamina as you're climbing from checkpoint to checkpoint up this big mountain. So a different kind of climbing game from one that I experienced last year with Jusant. But I enjoyed Jusant, and I'm down for more climbing. So this looks good to me. This next one that was announced in the pre-show, this was one of the most unique games I saw coming out of the show. We Harvest Shadows, by a single dev, David Whaley, Whaley. But he bills it as a first-person farming horror allegory. It's about a guy who lives on a farm by himself, very intentionally so. It seems like the developer in an interview was talking about an interview that Kyle Bossman did on stream, which was pretty cool. Was talking about how he wanted to like convey the experience of like, you know, sometimes people who experience depression, it can be really hard to just like get the will to leave the house. And that it seems like a lot of that energy is kind of going on here. Maybe seeing some creatures as you're, you know, like depressed by yourself in the barn, but it's also a kind of a farming sim, because you like have to, you know, go outside your barn, do some farming, because you're all alone by yourself and you're not going to the, you know, store to buy groceries. So you're kind of supporting yourself with food that you can get there, you know, growing yourself. But while you're tending the crops, there's also beasties coming out of the woods that you have to shoot with your gun. So it looks fascinating. I'm really interested to see what this thing, like how it's all going to shake out once it comes out. No solid release date on this one yet, just as coming soon. But We Harvest Shadows, looking forward to that one. The next one is actually the next game in this series, but also kind of a reboot for it. The Dark Pictures anthology from Supermassive, the same people that brought you, what do you call it? Until Dawn and The Quarry. This is their next game called Directive 8020, which is the first time that the Dark Pictures anthology has gone sci-fi. And this one looks like it's going to be pretty different from previous Dark Picture anthology games, because previous Dark Picture anthology games were way more like Until Dawn or The Quarry, where it's very narrative focused games. You might be controlling a character for a little bit just to move around an environment, to kind of adventure game style, you know, interact with some objects, might do some quick time button prompts to try and make it so characters don't die or something, mostly, you know, interacting with dialogue trees and stuff. But Directive 8020 appears to be kind of more like a more like game mechanics heavy survival horror game, something more like an Alien Isolation, where you are kind of stealthily making your way through an environment as you're being pursued by a creature. It seems, really different from what you would expect from the series and this developer. So I feel like that is enough to kind of, you know, want to keep your eye on it and see how it shakes out. And that was pretty much it for the pre-show. So getting into the main meat of the show, hosted by one Jeff Keighley. They kicked off strong with a game that I don't know if we necessarily needed, but is one that I'm sure a lot of people will get into. That's right, folks. The movie bomb / sensation of the summer, Borderlands, was not enough, because Gearbox has announced that Borderlands 4 is coming soon in 2025. This kind of a cryptic trailer that they showed for this thing, showing like a big moon, which I have since been informed is like at the end of the events of Borderlands 3, all the characters found themselves on a big moon hurtling through space, and in this trailer, said moon crashes into a planet, and I guess that is where this next game is going to be taking place. Kind of, we're moving off of the main world of Borderlands, that being Pandora, and moving to this new planet, which, you know, that's probably needed for as Borderlands 3. If you showed me a screen cap of Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3, I could probably not really tell you much difference between them. Maybe a graphical upgrade of sorts, but, you know, couldn't really tell you what in the world is different, really, like characters or enemies or whatnot. So it's probably a good little, you know, freshen up for the series, and we'll, you know, people like them Borderlands. I have not really been a big fan of Borderlands ever. I've played a decent amount of them, but I don't know, we'll see. Then we had a trailer for Goat Simulator Remastered, which I would probably not be talking about because I have never played a Goat Simulator game. They look like a fun little playground, but not really something that I'm super interested in. But the fun thing about Goat Simulator, it just like as a thing to witness, is that they have some of the coolest trailers for that they show for these big, game announcement streams. I think it was Goat Simulator 3 that had like the guy running on the boardwalk and a bunch of different stuff from different games, like from different trailers you would recognize from past, game announcement streams, kind of chasing him as like the goat was also there. This one was fun because it's a remaster of the original Goat Simulator. It was kind of a tour of a bunch of different games that have like kind of like more kind of shitty remasters. Like it showed one of the a Skyrim remaster kind of joke where the guy is on the wagon and are coming through, people clip into it. What appeared to be a NPC from Assassin's Creed Unity, kind of like his geometry clipping and freaking out. What looked like the UI from GTA, the definitive trilogy remaster that they put out. So just a lot of fun references. That's it, really. That's the most joy I get from Goat Simulator is these fun trailers. Next up was Dying Light: The Beast, which appears to be Dying Light. I haven't played any of them, but I've always understood them to be. So it's former Dead Island devs, and they went on and made a game kind of like it, a little bit more focused on character maneuverability, like parkour. I think Dying Light 2 was really focused on character choices that would like steer the story of the game in different. I remember the trailers always saying like, oh, there's like hundreds of different directions the story can go and whatever. But they're all more like kind of big open world zombie games. But this one, Dying Light: The Beast, which apparently has a I guess fan favorite character, Kyle Crane, starring in this new standalone, more like narrative focused game. So it appears like the levels might be more linear, perhaps, more like a single player like crafted experience of just like running through levels, mowing down zombies. And I think it's called The Beast because it looks like you're maybe infected with some kind of zombie monsteritis. I don't know. I think it's cool that like that when a franchise kind of goes outside of what it's known for, like the Dying Light being a big open world zombie game, and kind of experimenting and doing a different kind of game. So good on them. That I like big swings like that. And then after that we got a first real look at Dune Awakening. This is one that we've known is they call it an open world survival MMO. And we've seen trailers before, but they were more cinematic. This was the first time we actually got to see gameplay where you are dropping down on Arrakis with, I'm assuming, a crew of friends or maybe people you meet in-game in like a guild situation, perhaps. And it seems like a straight-up survival game where you build a base and try to, learn the ways of the Fremen to survive on the harsh desert planet of Arrakis. I don't know. It seems a little silly given kind of the tone of Dune. It seems like there's a lot more shooty guns than there usually is in Dune. Like a lot of the warfare in Dune tends to be, dudes on ground with knives, which it seems like there is some of that here. It has the fun, like shields, the kind of hologram shields that the dudes wear. They showed that off in the trailer with like some melee combat. So I don't know. I'm hoping that this comes out in a way that is like pretty accessible. I don't know, maybe like it'd be neat if it came out on some kind of Game Pass or something that I could convince some friends to try it out on. But I'm interested. I really, really like the Dune movies. So being able to kind of hang out, live in that world would be fun. You can summon a big sandworm. Like the sandworms kind of look like they're going to be what the nukes in Fallout 76 are. That the sandworms are going to be kind of like that in this, where you can summon a big worm to like eat a bunch of dudes or maybe someone's base or something. But I'm looking forward to that one. And here's one that I am probably looking the most forward to out of this whole presentation. This one looked the most interesting to me. A game called Reanimal, coming to you from Tarsier Studios, the people that brought you Little Nightmares, which was just announced that Little Nightmares 3 is being made by Supermassive. I may have talked about that last week. That is still weird and fascinating to me. But the Tarsier Studios, the people that brought you Little Nightmares 1 and 2, have now spun off with THQ Nordic to make this Reanimal. And honestly, it looks a lot like Little Nightmares. You're still little guys running around a big world with a bunch of really very well animated, creepy set pieces happening, like big arms and hands reaching into frame, bunch of weird big monsters. But this one looks like a bunch of really freako animal guys. One of the best things about Little Nightmares, so Little Nightmares as a franchise, the minute-to-minute gameplay is honestly fine. Like the puzzles are kind of whatever. I've heard like some developers, I forget who exactly said it, but the kind of puzzles in video games called nuzzles, where it's just like, oh, here's a key and there's a door, put the key in the door. Hey, you solved the puzzle. Like those kind of puzzles. Like I feel like that's a lot of stuff in Little Nightmares where it's like, here's the thing and take the thing over to the other thing and you solve the puzzle. So like that's not like the most compelling, but where the juice comes from Little Nightmares is kind of the art direction and how they have these big character models in the space. And it looks like this has a lot of that. Like there's one shot in the trailer that has this giant goat monster that is just like in between these two big skyscraper like objects, and it's just like tearing them down, chasing after you. It looks really cool. And it's like that's in the environment. Like they built and put that in like as you are running around, and that's pretty cool. So that looks like something that I'm very much looking forward to. No solid release date on that yet, just coming soon, but keeping my eye on that one. We got another look at Monster Hunter Wilds, where my Monster Hunter head's at. I have played some Monster Hunter. I played, I think, Ultimate 4 Ultimate on the 3DS. That's the most Monster Hunter I've played. I kind of missed out on the Worlds train when everyone else was really getting into it. But I have a friend who played a ton of Worlds, and I think I may have convinced to play Wilds with me once it comes out. But this it looks like what this one is really the new thing appears to be like mounted combat. Like I think you were able to like ride dogs in, what was it, Rise, Monster Hunter Rise. But this one, I think you have like a couple different kinds of animals that you can mount into combat. And in this trailer specifically, they showed off a couple new monster types. There's this really freaky rose spider thing. I don't know. I feel like you don't really have to do a ton to sell Monster Hunter now that it's like one of the most successful franchises for Capcom. But hey, Monster Hunter, if you're into it, it's coming. It looks good. There it is. We got a new fighting game from SNK. Well, maybe it's King of Fighters. Wait, no. It's Fatal Fury, the first Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. The first Fatal Fury game, it says, in after 26 years, which is pretty crazy. But Terry Bogart's here. He's got his hat. Sometimes he has his jacket. That was pretty cool. I'm glad that, there's people that play fighting games, and then there's people who play fighting games. And those people will be very excited for a new Fatal Fury. So I'm happy for those people. Then they showed off Monument Valley 3, which, a kind of like isometric puzzle game. People who are familiar with phone games may be familiar with Monument Valley. Very sharp looking, great soundtrack, Monument Valley 1 and 2. But Monument Valley 3 looks, to be like, hey, if you like Monument Valley 1 and 2, this looks like more Monument Valley. But the interesting thing about this is that it is being published by Netflix, because Netflix is trying to push their, hey, if you have a Netflix account, you can go on your phone and, download games through the Netflix app is a thing that you can do. But it looks like they're really trying to invest in that a lot more lately. So this one is coming, I believe, exclusively through Netflix. So, hey, you have a Netflix account, check out Monument Valley 3. Then we got I believe the first gameplay look at Sid Meier's Civilization 7, which, very much like the Monster Hunter, like the Monster Hunter people, you're going to play the next Monster Hunter probably. Civilization people, I have a feeling you're going to play the next Civilization game when it comes out. Very dedicated fan bases. But as someone who does not play a ton of Civilization, I'm looking at this trailer and I cannot really tell you what is different here. Even if it looks any better or worse, or what units or wonders that you can build look different, I cannot tell you. But I'm sure it won't take much convincing. If you like Civilization, to, hey, there's a new Civilization game out, you probably want to play that. Then, not a video game, but they showed what we were talking about last week. They showed off a trailer for Secret Levels, the Amazon-produced animated anthology series based on video game IP. We got a look at what some of those shorts are some of the IP those shorts are going to be pulling from. I got a list here. There's going to be Pac-Man, Warhammer 40K, Concord, the team-based hero shooter coming to PlayStation 5. We got one based on Mega Man, Unreal Tournament, Amazon's New World Eternum, sure. Armored Core, which that's very exciting. I definitely want to see that. Spelunky, Honor of Kings, Sifu, cool. Dungeons and Dragons, sure. The Outer Worlds, Crossfire, Exodus, and this just says PlayStation, which will feature a number of PlayStation games and characters. I assume, a God of War will probably be there. Nathan Drake from Uncharted will probably be there. I can only assume. That's a pretty good list of stuff. Definitely very excited for Armored Core. The Warhammer 40K is interesting because you don't have to search very hard to find very good looking animated short films of Warhammer 40K. There is a very dedicated, fan base of people doing that on their own anyways. But hey, sure. Some of the more classic franchises like Pac-Man and Mega Man, I'm sure will be interesting next to these things, because you will have to maybe get those games, especially Pac-Man is a little bit more abstract. So making a whole animated short out of that will be interesting. And then Dungeons and Dragons, which technically not a video game, but there have been video games about Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons as a game has done a lot to inform game design of most video games. So some pretty cool looking stuff. Looking forward to that coming to Amazon. We got a new look, or I guess a announced look at Batman Arkham Shadow, which is a Batman VR game coming to MetaQuest 3, which there was already a like Batman Arkham VR game, which was more of a like tech demo-y kind of thing. But this one actually looks like there is combat. Like this looks more like a game in which you are Batman, and it looks like they've kind of adapted the Arkham style combat to VR, where you're like, kind of dipping around dudes and doing counterattacks when, the little lightning bolts show up above their head. Might be, doing some detective vision stuff. So I don't know. I find it interesting. I mean, obviously, it's through Meta, and they have invested so much money into VR, which I feel like you don't really see a lot of news coming from the VR space these days. It seems like that craze, it's maybe still just a little too soon for VR to take off in a big way. A lot of that having to do, I think, with the, like accessibility of the price to get into VR. But for people who, I guess, are already in that ecosystem, this looks like an exciting thing to look forward to. Next, after that, was Hurdling from Okomotive, from publisher Panic, who's been doing a lot of cool stuff lately. This looks like a fun little, like you're a little dude, little shepherd, kind of shepherding a bunch of, furry beasts through the mountainside. I like a game that is a chill kind of escort mission kind of thing, like I was talking about last week, how much I like Eco. That style of game. This just looks like a chill, just like, making your way through an environment, hanging out with some furry friends. I can get down with that for sure. So there's that. This one is fascinating. This next game, we have Masters of Albion coming to you from Peter Molyneux, who we have not seen in a while. I believe the last thing he was doing was a Fable game, the creator of Fable, Peter Molyneux. And he was working on like a Fable game with like NFTs, which we all know how that turned out. NFTs, that is. And this is coming from, I guess, his developer, 22 Cans. And it's called Masters of Albion, which, if you remember, Albion being the world that Fable takes place in, but this is not an official Fable game. And there's like been discussion online about, well, how's he allowed to do that? And apparently Albion is like a real place in like English, or, like British English folklore. So it's technically not something that can be like, the word Albion cannot really be copyrighted. I think it's there's been a lot of debate about it, about whether or not, like, hey, can he really do this? Can he get in trouble for having a game called Masters of Albion? But what the game itself appears to be is a lot like some of his previous work, like Goddess or Black and White, where it's a kind of top-down god game where you're building towns with villagers, a lot of customization around the building of the buildings or the construction of the buildings, and interactions between the villagers. That showed a sandwich building mechanic in the trailer, or the gameplay look. So sure, looks like there might be some creatures coming to attack the town, and you have your villagers, suit them up to combat those guys. So fans of Peter Molyneux, something to look forward to. And then we have, again, another Netflix game coming to you based on a Netflix franchise, Squid Game Unleashed, which, not the most creative title. Just name of franchise : Unleashed is like one of name of franchise Origins, name of franchise Awakening. Like, it's not that creative, but this just looks like, hey, Fall Guys seems cool. What if Fall Guys, but Squid Games? That's really what this appears to be. And the trailer even seemed like a little goofy. Which, if you've seen Squid Game, not the most goofy in tone. Which I feel like has been a lot of stuff coming after Squid Game is like not really being reverent to what that show was really going for. But hey, there's money to be made, I guess, and Netflix wants that money, so here you go. Then we got to look at a game, Unknown 9, Awakening. Just as I was talking about games with uncreative titles. This one's coming from Bandai Namco, and it appears to be a kind of like narrative-heavy character action-ish game where you're able to like you have powers where you can like take over enemies. It says dodge bullets, and it's kind of got like some stealth mechanics. The interesting thing about this, that like it didn't really show a ton from the trailer as far as like what you'll be doing in the game, but the interesting thing about this is that it seems like they're really leaning into a kind of cross media thing. I found this out by looking at their website on Bandai Namco, but it looks like Unknown 9 is kind of the umbrella brand for this franchise, and Awakening is the video game. Then there's like a comic book called Tournament. They have a podcast. And it looks like all these things are like different characters, but they take place in the same universe. I guess the Unknown 9 are all these characters. So it seems like a pretty ambitious project. And this video game is kind of like the big, very big introduction for all these different things. So who knows how it'll shape up. It seems like those kinds of multimedia, like out of the box franchises tend to be kind of a hard onboarding for people. So if you like multimedia endeavors, there's something there. Next, coming to you from Nexon, people have brought you games like Dave the Diver and The First Descendant, DNF Duel, that fighting game. We have The First Berserker, Kazan, which looks like a character action game. Very good looking kind of anime cell shaded style. Like a kind of, the character models remind me of something like a like Guilty Gear Strive or something, that very striking, like, oh, if you're just looking at it from the side, you could mistake it for like a 2D animation, but once the camera pans around, it looks, very nice detailed 3D models. Looks like this game is very gory. It says it's a hardcore action role-playing game. So I'm thinking maybe if you like something like a Devil May Cry or maybe even like a Dark Souls or something, that's kind of what it's going for. Looking forward to that. 2025, it says. And then coming from Microsoft, one of their big tentpole games coming up soon, we got another trailer for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, coming to you from Machine Games. And yeah, it looks like, Indiana Jones, Machine Games. This game is interesting because it's first person, and I think a lot of people had issues with that. Like, I want to see Indiana Jones playing the Indiana Jones game, and it kind of tries to be both, it looks like, because a lot of the game is first person, but when you're doing certain actions, it goes into third person. I don't know how jarring that's going to be, but we'll see about that. I'm pretty sure this is coming to Game Pass, so I will probably end up trying this. I like Indiana Jones. I am kind of more interested in the Machine Games part of this because I really like their Wolfenstein games, and they're really good at making games where you kill Nazis real good, and I'm sure this will have that. So and also like the narrative part of Machine Games has always been very strong. So Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And then their one last thing for this whole press conference was another game coming to you from the Mafia franchise. From Hangar 18, we have Mafia: The Old Country, which I've only played Mafia 2, but I enjoyed it. I would say I'm a Mafia fan, I'm a fan of the Mafia. No, I'm I'm a fan of the Mafia franchise. But this is cool because it's the old country. So instead of a game, of a period piece taking place in an American city with like Italian immigrants, like forming the mafia in certain places. It looks like we're going back to Sicily to kind of see how mafia stuff comes from, the old country. It says it's set in the brutal underworld of 1900s Sicily. So an even earlier set, kind of time set piece. So that I'm glad that something as big, this is coming from 2K. It looks like it's got a big budget behind it. This is a kind of more daring setting, I think, for that this big a level of AAA game. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this one coming in 2025. And that was pretty much the show. That was Gamescom. Some decent announcements there. I think there was a lot more smaller games that I'm looking forward to coming out of this than I am some of the bigger games. But it was a solid show. It's interesting that it feels like there's the E3 kind of blowout of big game announcements is kind of getting spread thinner across the whole year now that Keighley kind of has multiple of these big, multi-publisher game announcement shows happening. But it was an enjoyable one. I'm hoping that I can at some point for the next one of these do like some kind of live stream on Twitch. That'd be fun to do like a reaction stream, kind of hang out with people in chat, reacting to the big announcements as they happen. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it happen for the Game Awards because my full-time job tends to get pretty busy around that time. I'm usually working while the Game Awards is happening, and I am able to watch the last hour maybe before it's all over. But hey, maybe sometime soon I'll be able to do something like that. Why don't we take a break? And when we come back, I'm going to kind of finish out some of the other news that happened this past week and talk to you about some of the games I've been playing. See you right after this. And we're back. And some of the... And we're back. Let's kind of finish out some of this news that came out over the past week. We got some trailers that dropped, some kind of release date announcements for some other stuff. First up is we got a new trailer for... So last week I was talking about the Kong Godzilla kind of MonsterVerse franchise of stuff. We're going to be dropping a bunch of new games soon. And we got a trailer drop for one of those games coming called Kong Survivor Instinct, which is something the way this game looks is something I was not really expecting from this franchise, but I really appreciate that, they have the MonsterVerse show on Apple Plus, Apple TV Plus. Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which I've heard is very good, is actually kind of secretly one of the best things coming out of this Godzilla, Kong, big monster franchise they have going on. And this game kind of looks like it might be kind of closer to that kind of like setting in the show where it's less about the giant monsters, but the people on the ground level. This looks like kind of it's a side-scrolling game where you play as a survivor that is looking for someone who is trapped in a city after monsters have kind of rampaged through it. And you will see, monsters still kind of running around. It looks like from the trailers, this big, crazy spider monster attacking the player in this trailer. But I think it's interesting that they are not, like fully focusing on the monsters. They're kind of having this more, ground level character driven narrative experience. So I appreciate that. And it looks like there's no release date yet, just coming soon, but it's coming to consoles and PC. So looking forward to that. Then we got a new story trailer for the Silent Hill 2 remake coming from Bloober Team, which it seems like the Silent Hill fans are very, seems like there's a lot of discourse around. I think a lot of horror game fans are not the biggest fans of Bloober Team, people that brought you games like Layers of Fear and The Medium. And those games have their fans, but they definitely have their, detractors as well. So I think when they first revealed Silent Hill 2 and they did the gameplay trailer, people I think were not too crazy about the way it was looking, like it was shaping up. But the story trailer seems like it really did a good job of conveying the parts of Silent Hill 2, the original, that are great about that game. The soundtrack is there, obviously, but it looks like they showed what, like, their take on some of the characters in Silent Hill 2 are going to be for this remake, kind of more, like subdued takes on these characters, kind of more, a little more fleshed out, which I think is promising. It seems like the fans that were really detractors of that first trailer are starting like, hey, maybe this won't be so bad coming out of the story trailer. So we will see when that game comes out. No one, much like Star Wars, no one hates Silent Hill more than Silent Hill fans. So I'm very interested to see what the take is going to be once that game comes out. And then this last bit of news, the Pokemon TCG Pocket coming to phones has a release date. It's coming October 30th this year. Pokemon TCG Pocket, I think, was shown off during one of the more recent Pokemon streams that they did announcing new Pokemon products. And so they have Pokemon TCG on phones already. You can kind of play like the virtual version of the physical card game as it is played in the real world, and you can like buy physical packs in reality, and they have little codes that you can use to get booster packs in the game as well. But Pokemon TCG Pocket seems to be something closer to more people would probably be familiar with something like a Marvel Snap, a very streamlined trading card game style game that has a faster time that it takes to play rounds of the game. But I think it's maybe something more comparable in this case might be Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, if you're familiar with that. Kind of taking an established card game and streamlining it into a faster format. Because with Duel Links, you have like the 5 lanes of Yu-Gi-Oh! And you have like 8,000 life points. But with Duel Links, they took it down to 3 lanes. We have like 3 slots for monsters, 3 slots for magic and trap cards, and took it down to 4,000 life. So it's kind of like more focused. And like a 20 card deck instead of 40 cards. So it's a more focused, faster rounds of play. And I think that is what they are trying to accomplish with Pocket, where there's, you have a limited amount of places that you can put cards, and the amount of damage you need to do to your opponent is less, resulting in faster rounds. But I feel like they are not really spotlighting that part of the product as much in these trailers. Whenever I watch a trailer, it's always, hey, check out, like, there's this screen-sized pack of Pokemon cards that you open up, and you can look at all the cards in 3D, and they're all shiny. Ooh, people really love There is a whole industry of YouTube like there's a whole corner of YouTube and TikTok and whatever of videos of people opening Pokemon cards. So it makes sense that that's what they would be spotlighting. But I've played the Pokemon TCG. I enjoy playing the Pokemon TCG. I have definitely played more Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh than I have the Pokemon TCG, but I will probably play and put a decent amount of hours into Pocket once it comes out. I am looking forward to this. And I'm sure there is at least one person, maybe probably two people in the Fatal 4 network of hosts that are also interested in playing that. So I'm looking forward to playing that with some friends. I'm sure it'll be a good time. My wife, who is very much a Pokemon freako, will probably be into this as well. So Pokemon TCG Pocket coming soon in October. All right, let's shift over let's get out of the news and shift over into some of the games that I have been playing this week. I checked out a game from earlier this year, Penny's Big Breakaway, which is a indie game coming from developer Evening Star, publisher Private Division, that kind of bills itself as being kind of like a Sonic Adventure-esque platformer where you are a character that has a ton of mobility options, really zipping around all the place in these very, focused linear levels that is you're really focused on just like momentum and zipping through these things. But the aesthetics of it, I feel like, are kind of more like a Nights into Dreams, if you're familiar with that from the Sega Saturn, kind of, these like jester performance kind of vibes. And the art style, I really like it. It's got like pretty general, like 3D model, like really exaggerated, cute characters. But in the way that the graphics are done in the distance, stuff that's out of focus kind of feels like the edges are kind of like crayon drawings. It's a really neat look. But you're this character, Penny. She's got a yo-yo, this like anthropomorphic yo-yo that, you did a performance, but the emperor didn't like it, and you broke the law because he didn't like your performance. So now he sent his army of penguins to come capture you. And it was decent. I played through it all. It takes about 6 hours to play through. And if I had to give it a score, 1 to 5, I would maybe give it a 3. I liked it fine. I feel like some of my issues with it is that the level design feels like it does not fully facilitate what you can pull off with the controls. And by that, I mean, I feel like a lot of the levels felt like it was a little too easy, like with all the options that you have at your disposal. Like you can kind of send the yo-yo out in front of you and kind of hang off it to do a little swing, like a Spider-Man swing. You can like double tap the yo-yo button to zoop forward, hit the B button to ride your yo-yo to kind of, get that Sonic spin dash kind of effect. And you have like all these options, and it feels like the level design does not always account for how well you're able to kind of zip through the levels in all these ways. But at the same time, like the levels are designed in such a way that it really wants you to keep momentum forward and just kind of go through them. But then there's also a bunch of collectibles throughout the levels that you really have to kind of stop and look for to kind of go down these diverging paths. And honestly, I didn't do a lot of that. Like I if I noticed the path, I would go down it, but I was not going to go back and try, I was not going to replay levels to go down all these different paths to get all these collectibles. Once I was kind of I reached credits in the game, I was kind of done with it. So I'm sure there are people who really, really enjoy that kind of Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Adventure style of gameplay that would be willing to go back and find all those collectibles, but I'm just not that person. But I thought it was fine. I don't know if it's gonna necessarily make it on to my top 10 by the end of the year, but I enjoyed my time with it. Then I'm still playing some Mega Man Battle Network on my Game Boy Advance SP. I've gotten to Iceman. I've beat Iceman. I've met the Proto Man analog in the game. Proto Man EXE with his net battler Chad, who I forgot his name was Chad, Chaud. So I'm like about halfway through that, but I'm still really, really enjoying revisiting Mega Man Battle Network. And then lastly, I am still chugging. I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast, but I am currently still playing. I played it when it started playing it when it first launched all the way back in February. But I am making my way through Persona 3 Reload, the remake of Persona 3. And that game is still really good. I've put about 60 hours into it at this point. And it is a game. It's a super long JRPG. And I feel like I have not, this is my first Persona. And I definitely plan on playing all the other Personas, but I feel like every Persona I'm probably going to kind of treat this way because they tend to be like almost 100-hour investments that I am going to play it, and then a new big game will come out and I'll focus my attention to the new big game and kind of play through that, and then go back to Persona 3 Reload when I have time. That definitely happened because it came out like 2 weeks before Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which was just unfair because Rebirth, I think I put close to 80 hours into that game before all was said and done, and I put the controller down on that one. But that, yeah, there's going to be some stuff that will interfere with my time with Persona 3 Reload, and that's just going to have to be the way it goes, I think. But I think like a little over halfway through Persona 3 Reload for, I'm in October now for, that means something to people who have played Persona 3, I'm guessing. But I'm having really fun time with it. This is my first time, experiencing, well, that's not totally true. I have played a Persona game before. I played the Persona 1 remake on PSP when that came out, which Persona 1 I feel like is very dated. It was very, I did not play a ton of it, admittedly. It's like a very hard to go back to like dungeon crawly RPG where you're having to kind of Pokemon style befriend personas to join your team through like dialogue options in combat. It's a weird one. And one that I again, it's a Persona game. I love the soundtrack, but it is a game that I did not really enjoy playing. But Persona 3, I am enjoying a lot playing. The combat's super fun. A lot more. I feel like you actually spend a lot more time in Persona talking to people and doing kind of like visual novel style, like dialogue options and just like seeing story play out in Persona. But I am enjoying that part a lot more than I thought I would, because the story and just like all the characters you meet are all really interesting and very fleshed out. I've already maxed out a few of the social links. I've maxed out, my courage and my charm all the way. I just have to max out my academics, which I think I'm very close to. So really, really enjoying Persona 3 Reload. I think that's the game I am kind of most focused on right now. It'll probably be that way until I think the next game I'm really looking forward to coming out in just like I think 2 weeks here, or maybe I think 1 week actually, is Star Wars Outlaws, which is kind of surprising because I'm not the biggest big fan of like the Ubisoft style open world games. But some of the buzz I've been hearing from, people from video game media outlets seems to be like they're having from the hands-on time they've had with the game, it seems like they've had a pretty good time with it. So I like living in the world of Star Wars through video games. So you'll probably hear me talking about that on a podcast here pretty soon. But that's all the games that I've been playing. Why don't we take another break here, and then we'll come back for our third segment. So I'll see you in a few. And we are back with our third segment. It's time for the Strafe Shuffle. And since Gamescom Live happened this week, I thought this would be a good time to kind of reminisce about press conferences of old. I grew up with G4 TV, as I'm sure a lot of you all did, in the mid-aughts, which was kind of my first introduction to watching big company press conferences like that. Specifically, like E3 was the time that all that stuff was happening. I'm pretty sure the first E3 press conference I saw was Sony's infamous 2006 press conference, which back then, they still were not fully mainstream with their press conferences. They were still very focused towards the business end of stuff because they weren't really used to having these press conferences be for the general audience. I'm pretty sure maybe GameSpot at that point was brought cameras to the shows and were streaming them online. But the first one I remember seeing was on G4, and 2006 was the year that they started to show off with hey, here's some sales figures about how the company's been performing because our stockholders are here and we have to present that data to make everyone feel good about that. But then that was the year that they revealed the price of the PlayStation 3 that was coming out later that year, which, if you remember, was $599.99, which I feel is maybe kind of normal these days. I guess the high end, that'd be the nice Pro model or something. But if I remember correctly, the PS5 when it launched was $499.99. So yeah, $600 was a steep price at that point. I think I had to wait about a year or two to get my PS3 because my parents were not going to spend $600 on a video game console for me. And I was fully a Sony guy growing up. I've never owned an Xbox unless it was a hand-me-down. I had an OG Xbox that my brother-in-law gave me, but I never owned an Xbox 360. I was fully PlayStation 3 during that generation. And then this press conference was also when they announced they revealed the PlayStation Portable, which is when you had the Ridge Racer audio clip, which is classic. But that's that's one of my nostalgia-wise, that's one of my favorite press conferences. And then you also have a bunch of other famous moments throughout the years, like the 2008 Nintendo press conference where they had the Wii Music segment where all the people were out there with their Wii remotes and wagging them around their instruments, which is just a weird thing to see. I remember there being a story about when they showed off the Skyward Sword demo during an E3. I want to say that was the 2010, maybe 2009 Nintendo press conference. And Miyamoto was trying to do the Wii controls for Skyward Sword, and it was the tracking just was not working properly. And I've heard, I forget what games journalist said it, but I remember him saying that he saw Miyamoto talking to people, people on his team, and he was just mad. And they described it as like seeing Santa Claus like be furious. It's so like, oh, like I'm not supposed to be seeing this. Like the beloved figure like Miyamoto just losing his shit at some, worker drones. And then as far as like press conferences go, I think some of my absolute favorite, but I would always look forward to press conferences from like Sony and Nintendo and Xbox for, like big game announcements. I was really excited about like the games coming out of those. But as far as press conferences as spectacle, as like sometimes even just like very comedic train wrecks, I feel like I have Ubisoft to owe for a lot of that juice when it comes to press conferences. Something I feel like is forgotten a lot that is a thing that happened was the 2009 Ubisoft press conference where they had this was the year that Avatar was coming out, the blue alien people movie Avatar, and they had James Cameron take the stage. I'm pretty sure this is the year that Joel McHale was hosting the Ubisoft press conference as well, which is also a weird thing. But I remember they had James Cameron come out to pitch Avatar, like not just the game that they were making, but like just pitch the idea of Avatar as a franchise and like give you the whole lowdown of like what Pandora was. And he just came out there and talked for a long time. I'm pretty sure longer than he probably should have about Avatar. And I don't think that there was a ton of details about the movie yet. And just like with no graphics on screen, really just a big Avatar logo, and just going like, what is this guy talking about? That was just a weird moment in E3 history. And then also I feel like the one that gets memed a lot from Ubisoft press conferences is the 2011 press conference with Mr. Caffeine. If anyone remembers Caffeine, this goofy guy in glasses that got up and made a bunch of just really dumb, like cringy jokes about like gamers, and like he would do like flashbacks a lot, and he'd make a dumb like doodle 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 sound. Like go look at Mr. Caffeine. You'll it's pretty easy to find, I think. Mr. Caffeine Ubisoft press conference. And then some of the later years too had like, there was the 2015 press conference where they had a Assassin's Creed Syndicate cosplayer show up in the crowd, and the host was like, hey, like let's do a meme. And like he did not have any improv muscles at all. He was just like, well, like if we're doing this to engage, then like Captain Picard, engage. And just like, it was like the host just had to punch out of it. It was really bad. Then Ubisoft press conferences also just have like, they do Just Dance every year, and they have a big dance number. Some guy in a panda suit dancing around. I don't know. Just Ubisoft press conferences were always the most fun. And it was also around I think around like the mid 2010s is when I started really watching like people's reaction streams to the press conferences, not just the press conferences themselves. This is around the time when I was like really getting into like Giant Bomb, let's say, and I would watch Giant Bomb's reaction streams of them like in the hotel room watching the streams. And that's when a lot of these like I think it was the EA press conference 2015 is when they for their NBA Live game that year, they were showing off the facial scan technology where you can like scan your face and put it in the game onto a character model. And they had their community manager, the Hoop God, come out, and you had this man in a business suit talking to and referring to this guy in a hoodie as the Hoop God. It was just bizarre and hilarious. And then of course 2016 was the infamous Weed 3, where they had like big name celebrities come show up to play Battlefield 1. And you had like Snoop Dogg and Wiz Khalifa talking about the secret weapon, which was like, it was totally weed. The secret weapon was weed. And you had Zac Efron and Jamie Foxx show up there too, like totally trying their best to play this video game, while Snoop Dogg has a very obviously lit weed cigarette in his mouth while playing Battlefield 1. And that's the kind of things that, E3 is essentially dead now. Like they have been trying to crack the nut of figuring out what E3 is in a post 2020 world. And it seems like it's just not going to happen. Like, pretty confident that the Jeff Keighley suite of big shows throughout the year now is kind of the new normal as far as companies making announcements about video games, which also kind of makes sense because, the messaging for these companies is a lot better for them this way too, especially because a lot of the bigger companies now, like Sony and Nintendo and Xbox, they're just able to control their message better because they do their own streams kind of around the Keighley stuff. So, and they don't have to buy out or rent out these big stages for E3, putting all that money into there. They can just hit play on a video, and that costs a lot less for them, and they're able to control their message better. So business wise, it all just makes a lot of sense. But as a consumer, I will always dearly miss the E3 era of making announcements about video games. Just the big stage pageantry of it all, which I feel like Xbox kind of understands and wants to do more of that. They still have people talk, like Sony and Nintendo is mostly just like, hey, here's some trailers and maybe someone talking over little breaks in between the trailers. But Xbox still has their people standing on a stage. It might be a virtual stage, but there is a human there talking about games that are being announced. And I think they still like that part of like the pageantry of companies announcing video games, which I know is a very silly thing to kind of be like A, nostalgic for, and B, kind of reverent of. But I'm kind of a lifelong sucker for this kind of stuff. Like E3 season, or now it's Summer Game Fest season. Just feels like gamer Christmas to me. It gives me the warm feelings, which I should maybe feel a little different about because it is just here's a big block of commercials. But I can't help the way I feel. I like video games, and that's why I'm here on this show. And hey, thank you for listening to this show. Thanks for listening to Squared Circle Strafe. You can leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. You can follow me on Twitter at UziNeon. If you want to catch more of me talking about some real nerdy stuff, you can follow the Didn't Get All of It podcast to hear me and the rest of the Fatal 4 hosts talk about the latest and greatest in professional wrestling. You can also sign up for our Patreon to get exclusive access to our Discord, as well as bonus content and the satisfaction of supporting independent podcasting media. You can head to patreon.com/Fatal4Pod. That's Fatal, F-O-U-R pod. Thanks again for listening, and as always, enjoy your gaming.